Today's episode is sponsored by Zencaster. So, a few years ago, I started a podcast, and one of my podcasting friends told me they record through Zencaster. I guest starred on his show. It was super easy to join through the invite link. I just plugged in my microphone and we recorded. When I listened to the episode, the sound quality was chef's kiss. I knew going forward I had to use Zencaster to record episodes for my own show. It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all in one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Go to zencaster.com/pricing and use my code FranksFiction, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all of my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Hello, my name is Frank DeLuzio, and welcome to Thrillers and Tea, the podcast where I discuss thriller stories and other book-related topics. This is episode 9, and today's thriller is one that was gifted and recommended to me, and that is Fantastic Land by Mike Bockoven. So we actually follow each other on Instagram, and he seems like a pretty cool guy. I want to give a couple of disclaimers. One, this book is a horror thriller, so there will be violence and gore mentioned. Going forward, I'm going to try to veer more towards mystery thriller books and psychological thriller ones. Second disclaimer, I will not be rating the book, but more so sharing a story with some commentary on characters and plot sprinkled in. If the book sounds interesting to you, regardless of anything I mention in the episode, you should check out the book for yourself. Before we dive into today's story, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Franks_fiction. I also have a book club on the Fable app under the same name, Thrillers and Tea. The books we're reading in the book club are the ones I talk about here, and who knows, I may share some of your comments. If you want to join the fun, all links will be in the show notes. I have to start you guys off with what this book is about. Maybe you don't know what Fantastic Land is about, and I'm really going to be delving into that story. But first, I have to do my honorary blurb reading of the book. Cue the ominous music. Since the 1970s, Fantastic Land has been the theme park where fun is guaranteed, but when a hurricane ravages the Florida coast and isolates the park, the employees find it anything but fun. 5 weeks later, the authorities who rescue the survivors encounter a scene of horror. Photos soon emerge online of heads on spikes outside of rides and viscera and human bones littering the gift shops, breaking records for hits, views, likes, clicks, and shares. How could a group of survivors, mostly teenagers, commit such terrible acts? Presented as a fact-finding investigation and a series of first-person interviews, Fantastic Land pieces together the grisly series of events. Park policy was the mostly college-age employees surrender their electronic devices to preserve the authenticity of the Fantastic Land experience. Cut off from the world and left on their own, the teenagers soon form rival tribes who viciously compete for food, medicine, social dominance, and even human flesh. This new social network divides the ravaged dreamland into territories ruled by the pirates, the shopgirls, the freaks, and the mole people. If meticulously curated online personas can replace private identities, what takes over when those constructs are lost? I hope that was a decent reading for you. I think I lost half of my speaking voice, so I hope I didn't lose all of it. Stop listening to this right now if you want to read before hearing any spoilers, because there will be spoilers. All right, you have been warned. Our very first interview comes from Jessica Landis. So she is a Fantasticland historian and author. You just know some shit went down if you have a historian on the matter. We're introduced to Johnny Fresno. So he's the original owner of Fantasticland Incorporated. His real name is Mohammed Assad Kassab. I hope I said that correctly. And he was a black sheep in his family. He didn't really go along with the family business. He was more of an artist himself. So him and Ollie Trax is the CFO of the company. They work together to create Fantastic Land, but there's lots of fighting between both of them. Fresno desperately wanted the park to be built near the ocean. That is very important coming up. And Fantasticland competed with Disney and Universal Studios and how well business was doing. So, this park had it going on. Also, another important thing to mention in this interview is that there are 6 distinct parts of the park. We have the Golden Road where you enter, we have the Fairy Prairie, we have Fantastic Future World, the World's Circus, the Hero Haven, and the Pirate Cove. And we're told that kids at this park had killed each other, but we don't know why yet. Second interview, we have Miranda Tots. She is the former director of the Palm Beach Treasure Cove region of the American Red Cross. That is a tongue twister. Well, Hurricane Sadie hits, and Hurricane Sadie is an extremely life-threatening hurricane. But because of the resources that Fantasticland had for disasters and emergencies, they were placed lower on the list for assistance as everyone in the area needed assistance. There's a specific quote I wanted to pull up, and Miranda says, "I don't want to make this sound like he didn't care about his employees. He clearly did from an administrative and personal standpoint, but in disasters, people react differently." I feel like that is a very important quote, and that also is just something to remember in life. I agree with that quote personally. But overall, Miranda focuses on having to help many others during the hurricane and after. Personally, to me, Miranda came off fairly distant from whatever happened at Fantasticland. But like I said, it's just my personal opinion. The way she was talking in her interview, like reading these first few interviews versus when you actually start interviewing people who were there, it's a total mood change for sure. Our third interview is Aaron Hoffman. So he's the husband of Suzanne and father of Kendall and Keenan, who we don't know any of these people yet. Personally, I thought these characters were going to be more important moving forward. Like I thought maybe one of the kids would have got stuck at the park or something, but that does not happen. So his wife and kids, they've been wanting to go to Fantasticland, but it is very expensive. It's like $3,500. However, it is still cheaper to go there than Disneyland. So that's how they end up going eventually. Their kids keep fighting about which areas they want to go. So Kendall wanted to keep going to Pirate Land, and Keenan wanted to go to the ferries. Aaron ends up flipping a coin, and they went to the pirates first. The next day, they decided they were going to see the ferries. But, however, a test alarm goes off at 4 in the morning, and the manager's claiming that it's just a test alarm. There's nothing to worry about. Suzanne recommends that they should leave because of the hurricane that is hitting Miami pretty hard. It's not at them yet, but it's hitting the state, which, by the way, yes, they are in Miami, Florida. But Aaron fought hard against it because of how much money that they spent at the park and the great time that they ended up having at the Pirate Cove the day before. But regardless of the alarm being a test, 2/3 of the patrons do flee. The hotel the family was staying at offered a free breakfast for the disturbance the test alarm caused. During the breakfast, Aaron started having a bad feeling because of the warnings on his weather app that he noticed the manager of the hotel was also ignoring. When they arrived at the park gate, the warnings were getting closer and closer to where they were. So a bus arrived to start evacuating patrons. Kendall ends up being separated from the rest of his family and was panicking. There's a pirate character that ends up calming Kendall down after Aaron stepped off to go get his son. Aaron and Kendall, they end up missing the bus and they have to catch the next one. Fortunately, they do catch the next bus, but Aaron does notice there were still thousands of people at the park trying to evacuate. Interview 4, we have Phil Mueller. So he is the head of Fantasticland personnel. He personally knew Johnny Fresno, who was the owner. Originally, Phil was a teacher at a community college in Florida, but Johnny came out of nowhere to meet him. Phil taught construction management at the college, and Johnny told Phil he was the only person that could do this job at the park. People from all over wanted to work at Fantasticland, and Mr. Fresno's main qualification from new workers was that they had to have the spirit, that they truly wanted to be there. Mainly kids did work at the park, and the staff overall was under 25 years old. Phil also ends up stating that the safety protocol was the hardest for the younger staff to remember because there was so many protocols. Fantasticland has 3 meteorologists that work at the park, and one of them sounds the alarm the night before the big storm. The staff was afraid of looters because they estimated that they would have a loss of $580 million, which is why they had what we call Operation Rapture in place. So that operation involved storm shelters and a skeleton crew to ride out the storm. The older crew, most of them at least, saw through the deal that was offered to them, but a lot of the younger crew were on board, hence a lot of kids being at this park during the day of the storm. As they were evacuating patrons from the park, Phil was trying to save anyone's life that he could. Phil ends up giving a speech to the staff about going to the storm shelters and that they would be there for 72 hours at most. The company had a deal with a private satellite company, and Phil himself saw that they were going to be fucked. Interview 5, we have Sam Garleek. Let me just warn you, this man is hated by everyone. I will probably be mentioning that a few times throughout the story, that everyone hates this man. And I didn't really understand at first, but we'll get there. So Sam is a first shift manager of Fantasticland. He's the one that's supposed to be running this whole Operation Rapture. And he claimed that all the employees made it to the shelter, and there was around 350 employees. The first day, everything went well besides one fight occurring, but it was a long-standing thing not really related to the evacuation. But Sam started noticing employees separating into 2 groups, those that were really interested in what was happening outside, and those who hung back that were pre-established groups of friends. The first group were crowded around the command center, demanding to know any updates to the storm. The other group were playing cards, and a group of girls were pretending to take selfies because cell phones were prohibited on the park grounds. That's also important to remember. The first night, the power ends up going out, and employees were fighting over flashlights or flailing around. They were panicking. Sam came up with a plan to partially open up one of the storm shelter doors so that light could come in and employees would feel less panicked. And he was going to work on getting the generator going again. But then he got hit in the back of the head, turned around, and was hit again in the dark. Sam grabbed what he thought was the person's head and smashed it into what he assumed to be a wall 3 or 4 times. When he finally had access to a flashlight and pointed downward, whoever Sam was fighting back ran off, trailing lots of blood. Sam discovered he was attacked by a keyboard. He heard a lot of arguing on the other side of the door as he was returning. The lights come back on, and everyone calmed down. Sam witnessed 3 people on the ground, 2 of them found dead. Sam makes a speech about keeping order in the storm shelter and that if anyone wants to leave and risk Hurricane Sadie, they can. He then traveled to the infirmary and discovered another 5 bodies. 3 were trampled, 1 went into shock and died, and 1 employee couldn't find his inhaler in the dark and suffocated. Sam ends up feeling a little less bad about that kid because it was Bryce Hockney, who is apparently his brother is a monster in this story, and let me tell you, he is. And we will be talking about Brock throughout a lot of the story, and he has an interview towards the end. Interview 6, Stuart Dietz. He is the Fantasticland maintenance employee, and he was known as one of the mole men because they had different groups. He's confident that Sam, our previous interviewee, killed the girl leading the infirmary that Sam claimed was trampled from the crowd. And that's always one thing that I found interesting with the interviews, was that we never know if these people are telling the truth at the end of the day. This is all first-person interviews, and perception isn't always fact. But essentially, Stuart was insinuating that she was the one that attacked Sam with the keyboard, and then Sam killed her in retaliation. Stewart was one of the older employees and stuck around with any of the other older employees that were in the storm shelters. He was one of the employees playing cards, trying to wait out the storm. They stationed on the opposite side of all the chaos that was going on down in the shelter. Claims there was 20 people in their mole men group. He also claims that the shelter was built so water wouldn't get in, so leaving the door to the shelter open wouldn't be a problem. Stewart was surprised that there was so much fighting because his little group, everyone was getting along. Carlos and Miguel and his group, they helped move dead bodies and cover them, meaning like the dead bodies that I talked about before. Their group decided to meet up and come with an escape plan out of the storm shelter. He claims that Sam thought he was in charge of everyone, but truly wasn't. Carlos and Miguel were the men that decided to head out in the storm to try to get some help. Stewart and his group were the only ones that knew about the underground tunnels that their specific job role had to use to get through the park without guests seeing them. They were going to camp out in them to stay safe. Unfortunately, Miguel never came back to the storm shelter, and when Carlos did, wondering where the rest of the mole men were, the pirates tribe murdered him. Interview 7, we have Jill Van Merveren. She was a fantastic land character and Deadpool soldier. Oh, before I start this interview, I will admit this was one of the hardest interviews to read for me because I felt like in any part of this story, this is probably where I got the most emotional. So I'm warning you now. It took Jill a few tries to get the job, but that was standard at the park. She was highly encouraged to push social media as it was the new word of mouth. She ended up in a viral video, which helped the park a lot. Jill then talked about when they exited the storm shelter and quickly mentions that everyone was talking about Sam killing that girl. She mentioned without their phones, all the kids were getting bored. Jill ended up reading some of the manuals while everyone was bored, and it said in the manual that shift managers were supposed to give instructions to their teams, but that never happened. It felt like no one was in charge. Some people started taking things from the shops, some hung out with their friends, and the majority of people were waiting in the middle of the park for instructions on what to do next. The shop girls were trying to protect their shops from being looted. The first issue Jill noticed was when they started getting low on food, a girl she knew, Riley, said all the food in the park would only last them 3-4 days tops. Her and a group of friends went into one of the restaurants at the park to get some food, and things were nice until 4 guys walked in that she didn't know. She was in the front part when they walked in, alone, while everyone else was in the kitchen. She said they were all giving this smug grin because she was a woman with a nice set of boobs. One of them makes a specific comment about them while the other guy laughs. She started feeling a little uneasy because she took martial arts classes to get more in her soldier character at the park. The guys continue to make jokes until one of them tries to grab her. She defends herself by grabbing his arm and slamming his nose into the counter. Her friends run out from the kitchen, and the other guys look shocked over what just happened before running out. The group devised a plan to create a base and get as many recruits as they can by inviting people to a big meal at the restaurant. They notice, however, that a lot of the people are crowded around something or someone. There was a guy that was climbing the roofs earlier pretending to be Batman. He fell and he hurt himself pretty bad. People wanted to help but had no way of helping. A guy comes through the crowd with a station and crushes the guy's head in, muttering, "Someone had to do it." It was later discovered that person was Brock Hockney, and that was the monster that was mentioned earlier in the story when his brother died. Jill can sort of understand why Brock did that in that moment because the guy was suffering, and what was anyone going to do to help him? Her group was able to get 50 people to meet at the restaurant. Riley really stepped up as a leader to try to create a group that would protect each other and be able to survive. Word around their group spread throughout the park. Then they were approached by Sam telling them that they didn't need to form this group and that the park was safe. No one took Sam seriously. Everything with the group was going okay. Everyone knew what they were doing until her friend Tom and a few other people went out to patrol. They should have only been gone for 15 minutes, but they hadn't come back yet. Jill and the group heard an explosion outside, later found out to be a flare gun. They witnessed Brock Hockney and 2 of his friends with Tom tied up. Eventually, they're able to get Tom back, but notice that Brock and his friends cut Tom's hands off. Tom was bleeding out, screaming and crying, and no one knew what to do. By the time they realized they could make tourniquets, Tom had lost consciousness. Tom ended up dying, and the pirate tribe, Brock's tribe, left Tom's hands in front of their base entrance with the middle fingers standing up. One of those guys, part of the patrol, end up leaving their tribe to go join another one. Riley ended up grabbing a real sword from the comic book shop and said, "No, we are not safe, but neither are they." Interview 8, we have Cristobal Abasola. He is the concession manager in the Fairy Prairie and eventful robot soldier. Cristobal is the guy that ended up leaving Tom's patrol team and the soldiers. He left them mostly because he didn't want to be near the pirates or have another encounter with them. A lot of the employees he worked with were girls, and he felt like he should start getting to know some of the guys at the park as he felt they could protect each other. Once that death occurred with the guy falling off of the roof, that's when people officially started forming tribes that they thought were best to protect them. He originally could have been part of the shop girls since he was their boss, but he was good friends with a guy named Travis that was part of the hero or soldiers tribe and went with them. Riley wanted Cristobal to be one of the guys that went on patrol first, and it took some convincing from Travis to do it. Travis introduced Cristobal to Tom, Sam, and Adrian, and they ended up making up the first group of 4 to patrol the park. Adrian was a woman that didn't speak English well, but felt comfortable when Cristobal would talk to her in Spanish. Tom felt it was rude for them to talk in Spanish when they can't understand it. Side eye there. Side eye, Tom, that's why you lost your goddamn hands. No, I'm just kidding. The patrol took a while because there were no lights. They had flashlights, but it didn't do too much for all the darkness. Also to mention, it's been lightly raining this whole time. The patrol team ended up in the pirates' gift shop, and Cristobal didn't know why Tom led them there. Tom and Sam started taking some items from the gift shop. Cristobal heard what sounded like a group of boys with swords approaching and told Adrian to hide. Tom, Sam, and Cristobal go out the front door after Brock called for them to come out. They didn't expect the situation to be as dangerous as it truly were. The pirates said, "You were caught stealing." One of the main pirates told them that they could either join them or take their punishment and go back to their tribe. Tom apologized and offered to put everything back. Brock stepped forward and smashed Tom in the nose with the handle of his sword. Sam told the pirates he would join them. When they asked Cristobal the same, he reluctantly joined. Brock announced that they have 2 interested in joining, but only 1 spot open. Whoever brought them Adrian from hiding, they could join the pirates. Cristobal was hoping they were going to have to fight each other instead, but Sam ran into the shop to try to get Adrian. They scuffle, but Cristobal lost Sam for a moment until he discovered Sam dragging Adrian out of the t-shirt shop. Cristobal ran towards him before Sam punched him hard in the face. Sam came out with Adrian, and Cristobal came out after, which Brock viewed as an act of bravery to not try to run off and hide after defeat. Cristobal was tied up, but because of the darkness, he realized he could escape from this easily. He wanted to see what happened to Sam and Adrian first. They branded Sam as one of them, which ended up being a mark with a piece of metal and flame on his shoulder. Brock told Sam that in order to be a pirate, he must inflict pain, and that meant to Adrian. Sam was given a piece of hot metal and was supposed to stab Adrian in the cheek. Cristobal wanted to save Adrian, but there were 20 men that would prevent it. The metal got stuck in her cheek, and Adrian is hysterical and in pain. When everyone goes to handle the situation, Cristobal ran off in the dark. Interview 9, we have Elvis Springer. He's the security manager and leader of the robots. Elvis viewed the fighting at first similar to a soap opera. He worked at the park for 8 years, claiming it's been much longer than a lot of the kids. He explained why his section, meaning everyone who worked security, didn't stop the violence. That the park was really big, and he was given a lot of responsibility that Sam should have been doing. So he played defensive. Personally, to me, I feel like that's all complete bullshit. That he didn't hear blood-curdling screams, and I feel like your job was to protect others. But I don't know, some people, I guess, who work security jobs aren't qualified to work them. Elvis claimed he helped some of the kids that were crying about needing to call their parents and not having their phones. They ended up hosting a talent show. They played some cards, drank beer. Personally, I find it off when a grown adult is drinking with minors, besides the legality issues. But after a few days, they run into Cristobal, and that's the guy that fled in the last chapter, and was sharing with Elvis about the pirates and all the horrible things he went through. Elvis asked Cristobal if he could keep this info to himself for now while he tried figuring out what was going on, but Cristobal didn't, and now the robot tribe, or section, were panicking. Elvis told them not to panic, but he went on a search for the riot locker as it had guns in it. The locker, however, was in the ferry section of the park. I personally liked how Elvis described the eeriness of an amusement park without the guest. When you think about it, it's the people that are what add life to everything at an amusement park. No one was in the ferry section. It looked like the section had been ransacked. Elvis went to check the locker, and the guns were gone. He's been walking around with Karen. Their dynamic is that Elvis is divorced and Karen is in a relationship, but claimed it's not serious, and Elvis and Karen have hooked up with each other at work and in the shelter. He talks about how a lot of the kids are grabby with each other, too. They end up approaching the pirate section where 3 kids were guarding the gate holding pipes. One of these kids proceeds to ask Elvis, "How much for the woman?" Elvis jokes back with them, but then 30 other kids approach the gate and start throwing rocks at them. Karen runs off fast, but Elvis gets pelted by a few. Suddenly, Karen falls hard due to a tripwire made from Christmas decorations they had at the park. Elvis picks up Karen to keep running, but a few pirate kids catch up, one kicking Elvis in the shin. That kid is standing above a fallen Elvis and Karen until a kid from the hero tribe kills him. The heroes proceed to help Elvis and Karen as they're attacking the pirates. Elvis hides behind some barrels, but unfortunately, the pirates got to Karen and beat her to death. Riley, leader of the soldiers and heroes, shows Elvis that the pirates hung Karen's body on a lamp post. Elvis offers to Riley that the heroes could join all of them in the robot section, but Riley responds, "No one is going to take our section." Elvis bawled his eyes out when everything started settling in. Before going back to the future and robot section, he checked in on the circus section to witness severed heads on stakes. So at this point in the story, I'm thinking it's been 4 days since the storm, and there's outright murder and war. Like, what in the hell is going on? All right, interview 10 is Sophie Ruskin. This is a very interesting interview, and you're definitely going to want to remember Sophie. She was a ride operator in Pirate Cove, and she is considered unaffiliated to the tribes. Sophie claims she's only doing the interview to talk about Austin. Austin was a hustler and boyfriend of Sophie. He had a rough childhood, as he was practically abandoned. Austin was 19 years old and worked maintenance at the park. She snuck a phone into the park whenever she worked, regardless of the rules. Sophie talks about this guy that kept getting back on her ride over and over again, but each time with one less piece of clothing. It's revealed that he was making bets with a bunch of workers and eventually rode her ride without any pants on. Sophie says, "I just had to get to know this man who would ride without any pants on." Girl, girl. Sophie, raise your standards. From the way that you talk, I could just assume you would have no problem eating squirrel off the side of the road, but no, ma'am, this is not it. If I ran into this guy who was doing this shit, I would run so far in the other direction. I just back to the story. So Sophie reveals that this was Austin's bum ass that we've been talking about. So Austin ended up talking Sophie into working the day of the storm, and she says that Austin was her world and vice versa. They had only been dating for 2 months. Girl, that is practically a stranger. I swear this is how we fall into codependent relationships and just a whirlwind of chaos that we mistake for passion. But Sophie claims that Austin knew almost everyone that worked at the park, and a lot of them apparently loved him. During the storm, Austin and Sophie were more as a duo and not part of any tribe or section. It's revealed that Austin was the one who took the guns from the ferry section. Austin grabbed them because he could sell them to other people, or if they really needed to, use them to protect themselves. Sophie makes a point to say that she thinks the kids killing each other was bullshit. I'm guessing she missed the severed heads and hanging bodies, and I feel like later in the interview she contradicts herself when she mentions hearing the pirates talk about the dead bodies, but neither here nor there. Austin and Sophie, they end up finding a lot to smuggle. They end up finding 100 smartphones, condoms, and a suitcase full of weed. Both of them also notice that they have rashes that were burning. The shop girls end up stopping them, and Clara, their leader, comes to try to help Austin. Sophie didn't like that. But as Austin is looking through the medical supplies the girls have, Clara asks Sophie if she wants to ditch Austin and stay safe with them. Sophie declines, and the couple keep moving. But one of the shop girls tries following them to figure out where their stash was. Fortunately, they end up losing her. Austin and Sophie kept traveling to other sections who wanted their inventory but didn't want to pay for anything. Everyone warned them to stay away from the pirates. The couple kept hiding wherever they could, as some people were trying to find them so they could get to their inventory. One night, Austin doesn't come back after 8 hours, then a few more, and the next morning she's convinced he's dead. But Sophie never finds out what happened to Austin. Interview 11, Clara Ann Clark. She was a gift shop manager and leader of the shop girls. This was her second year working at the park, and she claims that 90% of the shops in the park were staffed by girls. Her job mostly consisted of handing out coupons and pretending to apologize to stressed out customers. But there was one customer that attacked her personally, and it stuck with her ever since. The irate customer called her ugly, stupid, and said that the other gift shop girls were saying the same things behind her back. Personally, I feel like that's a very strange thing for a customer to say, but okay. Clara quickly mentions of how much Sam was a terrible leader. Like, literally, no one liked this guy. She also mentions that the kid falling off of the roof was the inciting incident to all of the horrible things that happened. Clara noticed a lot of the shop girls crying and freaking out and started to tell them what to do instead of wasting time. Clara gathers the girls around the body of the boy who fell off of the roof and gave them a speech so that the girls could get over their fears. She told the girls they should live by 2 rules. 1, the shops are our space, and no one is taking anything from them. They essentially end up having enough food and items they could live off of for a month. And 2, they take care of each other. Claire says that no one ever questioned her leadership, but they became a solid group. She was trying to work with the fairy tribe and the future robots, but Elvis had them bunker down after what happened to him. She talks about how Elvis and Riley were good leaders of their tribes, but that the fairy tribe didn't know what they were doing. Claire heard a rumor that the pirates were capturing girls from the fairy tribe. The shop girls used bow and arrows as weapons, and they had to deal with raiders, but she's not sure exactly which tribe that was. Clara talks about how she typically hates people, but she loved her girls, and they put up one hell of a fight. And so far in the book, I respect the shop girls tribe. Today's episode is sponsored by Zencastr. So a few years ago, I started a podcast, and one of my podcasting friends told me they record through Zencastr. I guest starred on his show. It was super easy to join through the invite link. I just plugged in my microphone and we recorded. When I listened to the episode, the sound quality was chef's kiss. I knew going forward I had to use Zencastr to record episodes for my own show. It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code FranksFiction, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all of my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Interview 12, we have Chase Pounder. He was the ride line supervisor and a pirate. Chase was a college student who worked one of the ferry rides. He claims he'll spare the details about his life working at the park, as he proceeds to tell us about difficult customers he worked with at the park. Chase claims that after the shelter, everyone didn't go back to their work sections or tribes, but instead the friends they had grouped up with. Plus, a lot of the guys who worked in the ferry section didn't want to go back there for cover. Chase was one of the very few that had stayed in the ferry park with mostly ladies, and the reason he stayed in that ferry tribe was that he wanted to get laid. Oh, big eye roll there. Also, aren't a good amount of these workers underage? His second reason he claims that he had a misguided sense of duty. The ferry tribe kept getting warnings from the pirates that something bad was going to happen. Chase came across an important warning one day from the pirates, but never showed anyone. He witnesses one of the ferry girls being taken by a pirate and says he could have stopped him, but he felt they were already done and that banding together like the shop girls wouldn't have worked. He also explains that the ferry section was viewed as weak by all the other sections. A couple of the pirate guys, they stole food and water from them and would steal one girl at a time at random times. Chase sneaks into the pirate territory and witnesses Austin pistol whipping one of the pirates. Two more pirates jump Austin and Chase. When Chase comes to, he witnesses Brock Hockney confronting Austin about where the rest of the guns are. Austin tells Brock they have to trust each other, but Brock doesn't trust him and pistol whips Austin in the side of the head. The gun went off and the bullet barely grazed a pirate. Brock proceeds to stomp Austin hard on the chest and head. Austin is twitching on the ground until Brock shoots Austin 6 times. After that, Chase wakes up again in a jail cell with 3 other girls. He soon is faced against one of the girls he was in prison with, and both are forced to fight each other for a spot in the pirate tribe, led by Brock Hockney. Pirates are cheering while watching them fight, and Chase is thinking, I don't even want to be a pirate. Chase wins the fight, and Brock hands him a knife to kill his opponent. Brock helped Chase stab her, and then hugged him afterward. Chase mentions that he's in therapy dealing with all of this, and he mentions quickly that he was part of the final charge towards the shop girls. The last thing Chase says is that he wants to die every day. For me, it's really interesting and sad to see what people will do in order to survive. Interview 13, Sal McVeigh. He was a parade dance troupe, guest relations, and a pirate. So I'm just warning you, which fortunately for you, you don't have to listen to it. Sal's voice is truly terrible to listen to. This was one of my absolute least favorite parts of this book, besides someone way later. Sal first mentions that he cut a deal and he isn't going to jail. Sal seems to be into getting money and fame from the situation. And sir, you already sound like a disgusting human being. He claims that the pirates were not monsters and that rape didn't happen. Sal does claim that there were plenty of female pirates as well, and there may have been some hookups. Sal mentions that he heard over 100 people die during the storm. On day 3, Brock started hosting the fights because everyone in their section was bored. But in the starting fights, no one was dying. We get an update on what happened to Sam. This was the patrol guy that fought with Cristobal to give the pirates Adrian. Since Sam messed up with stabbing Adrian, Brock told Sam they're going to fight. Sam was crying and Brock beat him until he was unconscious, threw him in a pool, and Sam drowned. Brock tells them that there are 4 rules to being a pirate. 1, a pirate is not afraid in public. 2, a pirate respects himself and their chain of command. 3, a pirate does not steal from another pirate. And 4, a pirate fights for what he has or he does not deserve to draw breath. He mentions another rule, which to me makes me wonder if this is to show that Sal is a complete dumbass like I think he is. And that rule is no one takes what you have and no one takes what we have. Sal mentions Jenny, who we find out is the girl that Chase had to kill in the last chapter. Brock became pretty close to her and they helped train her so she would be ready to fight. Sal thinks that a lot of people joined the pirate tribe once they exited the shelter because there was clear rules and a clear leader that came off as powerful. To me personally, Brock was a master manipulator that found his followers. Sal mentions that a lot of them came from good families, which that statement makes me think maybe there was a social class theme. I didn't say it earlier, but Clara mentioned being bullied growing up and not coming from the best family. We also heard Austin had a rough upbringing as well. Brock warned the pirates not to go to the circus section, also known as the Freaks tribe. Sal and some other pirates explored the circus area anyway, and for a while, they see nothing there, but nothing in an eerie way. As they explore further, they hear that typical circus song, but in a minor key. Then, a spotlight came on. That's when they could see the following. 2 bodies were hanging up by the inside entrance, a severed head, and they're not 100% sure if they saw skin of bodies. The pirates fled until they ran into 2 guys in masks who I originally thought were part of the circus guys, but these are the warthogs, which are going to get mentioned later on. And they were holding machetes covered in blood, and they had a sack with them where something was moving in it. The pirates get away, but there was no fight between them. Sam Garlick ends up at the pirate gate and wanted to talk to whoever was in charge. Brock and Sam talked. Sam handed him a piece of paper, and that was it. They were invited to something called the Summit of Peace. As a reader, we end up getting to read what Sam's letter said, and to me, it was very telling that Sam almost cared more about Fantastic Land's future image more than the people who were dying. And I feel like if certain companies were in this exact predicament, they would handle it the same way. Sal recollects on Karen's death and how she tried to hurt us, so we hurt her, which meanwhile, in Elvis is telling, Karen literally didn't do anything. Next, we have interview 14, Glenn Guignol. He was a fire breather in the World Circus and head of the Freaks. Glenn mentions that he doesn't understand how the employees working there forgot their Fright Night was coming up, hence the displays at the circus section. Honestly, it just goes to show how dumb these employees are, but I guess fear doesn't also help with thinking rationally. Glenn describes their tribe as mostly high and happy during most of their time because they were left alone. Glenn also mentions the distaste for Elvis Springer, leader of the Future Robots tribe. Glenn took his work seriously and believed Elvis had the opposite approach when it came to work. Elvis had went to Glenn in his section to tell them what he went through and to warn them that they need to fight back. Elvis was also trying to recruit members from the circus section. Glenn told Elvis to spread the rumor that the circus members are freaks and demonic so that they would look fearsome. After Elvis left, Glenn and his tribe decorated their section in the most gruesome way possible. He also described how the tribe left fake notes around the park to make the rumor of their section sounding more real and horrifying. For example, a fake note from one of the future kids saying, "They're cutting up his body piece by piece, please help him." Glenn mentions that people are dumb, and personally I found a whole new respect for this tribe. That one may have thought at first glance they were also ransacked like the fairy tribe, but they played it smart. The music that Glenn had played in the circus tent was the beginning of an Ozzy Osbourne song. When Sam came by with his letter, Glenn says they did not drop the act. Overall, most of the freaks made it out of the park by the end, similar to the Mole Men group. The two people that were dressed up with the bag, everyone associated them with the circus section, like myself, but Glenn says they had nothing to do with them. He ends up sharing an interesting quote that pretending to be the most violent is what truly saved them, but ended up causing more violence at the park. Interview 15, Louise Musgrove. She was a cashier at Hero Haven Comics and one of the Deadpool soldiers. Louise first talks about Sam coming by to give them the same invitation letters the other has discussed, and Riley, the hero's leader, was on board. Once again, she does not like Sam either. Every day, the heroes received threats from the pirates. Louise mentions that her, along with a few others, wish they could charge whatever phones were snuck in or cameras because the amount of money they could have made from documenting what's been going on. Around noon, some members of the tribe set out to meet in the center of the park for this meeting. Sam was calling everyone too. Most tribes were there except for the pirates, freaks, and fairies. What a sentence that is. Two men, Glenn being one, showed up for the freaks. Brock showed up by himself. And at this point of the story, I was wondering if he had guys hidden, ready for some sort of attack. I could see his crusty, dirty ass doing that. And ultimately, no one ended up showing up for the fairies. Louise had transcribed the meeting, and the following was shared. Sam greets them and is immediately met with the rumor of him killing that girl in the shelter. I'm wondering to myself if this is what actually started the increase in violence, because before that, there wasn't anything too out of the ordinary. Sam then gets hit by a rock in the shoulder after Sam talks about the park's reputation if new employees were killing each other at the park. Sam mentions that it's been 25 days that they've been there. I'm sorry, I know towards the beginning of the book, rescue teams were trying to help everyone, but how in the hell has it been 25 days and no one has tried saving hundreds of people at this popular amusement park? And how did no one ever end up killing Sam if no one liked him? These are my questions. I need answers. Sam mentions that some of them would be going to jail for killing people. Brock Hockney and Sam have a back and forth when Brock brings up his brother's death. All of a sudden, I laugh because how fucking ridiculous this next part is. The table that they're meeting at blows up because apparently the pirates had set up that table and no one questioned who did. And the pirates hid a cannon under the table. Not one single fucking person noticed that. You all deserve to die at that point. Sorry. Just no. Like, that is so ridiculous. The cannon completely decimated someone. Louise had no clue who that was. It's revealed that it ends up being Charlie, who was the leader of the Mole Men. Elvis is trying to hold his head up, but he was clearly dead because half of his head is gone. The rest of the pirates showed up and they start killing people. The Mole Men and the freaks fled. The heroes are fighting the pirates yet again. Honestly, a huge shout out to them for trying to take those losers out that are killing them for no goddamn reason. Louise fled back to the heroes to try to get them to help, but by the time that happened, Riley and the few others that attended the meeting with Louise, they were dead. Interview 16, we have Stuart Diaz again for a second interview. Personally, I wished more people came back for a second interview. I think Stuart is the only one in the entire book that has a second interview. And once again, they're just reminding us that he is fantastic land maintenance. The canon ended up missing him in the meeting, obviously, because he's alive to do the interview. When he got out of the park, Stuart had a minor blood infection due to a piece of wood that hit him in the shoulder from the cannon's impact. He described Charlie's horrible state. Lucy, one of the maintenance workers, was being chased by a pirate and called Stuart for help. Stuart ends up killing the pirate. The Mole Men have developed friendships with the robots, heroes, and the freaks. During the fight at the meeting, 9 Mole Men returned, and 6 of them died. They all cried over Charlie and the others' deaths. They devised a plan to try to knock down the exclamation point in the middle of the park so that maybe someone would see that and go help them. So I don't think I've really mentioned the exclamation point. It's mentioned a lot throughout the book. I don't really know how much importance it really has, except for that it's literally in directness of the park and it helps you kind of guide. It's like the middle point that guides you to every other section in the park. Stuart snuck out at night to check out the exclamation point. Eventually, he notices that a girl is following him. He mentions it was a woman with a bunch of guns, so I'm assuming he ran into Sophie, and Stuart retreats back to the mole base. Because of the wind and the rain a couple of days later, the mole men decided to go out as a full group back to the exclamation point. An hour into their work, they start hearing gunshots. Stuart ends up mentioning something about their families, and that's when it finally hit me. How in the world did not one parent or family member go to see what was going on? If my mom didn't see or hear from me in a month, she would have hauled ass to that park, regardless of the weather. But back to the story. 4 or 5 pirates run at the mole men. Most of them start fleeing, but Stuart hit one of the pirates in the face with his flashlight and knocked him on the ground. But then the kid that he knocked down is dragged off by someone, but Stuart couldn't see who that was. During all of this, Mole Man Tomas has been working on trying to detonate the exclamation point. Tomas hits the button when they're all back at camp, and Stuart ends up realizing that these explosives are much stronger than he originally thought, completely knocking out the exclamation point. He feels like that's what really caused events to escalate even more. Interview 17 is actually by an anonymous source, and I thought that was kind of interesting to have someone speak anonymously about the events that they claim doesn't want to face retaliation. All we know is that it's a female employee, but soon in the interview, I assume this is one of the shop girls. The woman mentions, "We were sisters," and the exclamation explosion killed 3 girls. They were ready for a fight, but no one came. Clara told the group there has to always be someone on guard after the explosion. The pirates started raiding them with cannons. Besides bow and arrows, the girls had sports equipment like bats and tennis rackets for other weapons, and wore sports gear as armor. Anonymous used a metal baseball bat for her weapon and was ready to claim some bodies. She mentions that some fairy girls had converted into pirates, and she ran up to one and smashed her in the head with her bat. Their archers were shooting down the lady pirates. The shop girls actually win this mini battle against the lady pirates. Clara had made her own sword, and when one of the lady pirates was on the ground yelling about her arm, Clara stabs her in the head and moves it around until the pirate stops moving. These shop girls were ruthless in battle, but if we're killing pirates, I'm rooting for them. But I also have to remind myself that a lot of the fairy tribes were forced into joining the pirates. And when you think about all of this, if it were real, it would be so incredibly sad. Daniel, I'm assuming, is the new leader of the heroes after Riley, meets with Clara, and they agree that they need to form a strike force against the pirates before they know how to properly use the cannon and do even more damage. Anonymous is yelled at by Clara about being part of the task force. The team ends up being 7 of them, a mix of shop girls and heroes. They decide to try to push the cannon into the water, but get noticed as they get close to the water with it. Fortunately, they successfully push the cannon in. The strike force runs away and they hide in a taffy store. The pirates gave up pretty quickly looking for the task force because they wanted to try to save the cannon, which it gets revealed they end up not being able to. As Anonymous is hiding, she hears fighting in the store and discovers Daniel cut a hole into Drew's neck, which was one of the shop girls and a good friend of Anonymous. Behind her, Freckles, she calls her, who is a hero's girl, and Clara Ann, they start fighting. Anonymous hit Freckles in the back of the head with her bat. Daniel notices and runs at Anonymous with a knife he found. Clara Ann lunged at Daniel and stabbed him in the eyeball. Daniel retreats. Okay. I don't know how he got away so easily, but okay. And Clara Ann tells Anonymous to take care of Freckles since she wasn't dead. Anonymous sensed a weird understanding between Freckles and her because they both knew what was about to happen. Anonymous was going to have to kill Freckles. Anonymous got out all of her frustrations by swinging over and over again into Freckles. She mentions the third Deadpool guy ran off, and the fourth shop girl, they never knew what happened to her. She ended up disappearing. When they eventually left the park, Anonymous had looked up Freckles and really got to know her through social media. She didn't understand why the heroes went after them, but Clara got close to her face and said, "We were all going to have to kill each other eventually," because they were starting to realize that they may never get out. And if they had killed the rest of the tribes, they'd have to kill in their own tribe until there was one left. The next night, the pirates attacked them again, ending with the shop girls losing 5 girls and 2 pirates dead. Anonymous mentions the heroes never raided them, but the pirates continued to. One of the other shop girls went to Anonymous and asked her if they should assassinate Clara because of the way she'd been running the group, but Anonymous said, "Let Clara lead." Drew's death still continues to affect Anonymous to this day. Interview 18, Jason Card. He was a retail cashier. Funny enough, this was the chapter that a lot of readers that loved the book said this was one of the most exciting chapters for them. And for me, this was one of the most boring chapters in the book. And I didn't find a lot of importance with this character personally. During Operation Rapture, Jason was stuck in the hotel outside of the park. One girl and one guy come in and notice Jason from up above. And I'm thinking that maybe they're the warthogs mentioned by Glenn earlier. There's a big cat and mouse chase between the two people trying to catch Jason. The two intruders try chainsawing the door as Jason tries sneaking out the window. Jason was 20 floors up, but he didn't want to be chainsawed, so he jumps out of the window and somehow lives. It's just hard for me to believe. I don't know if that's Jason lying or if that's something off with the writing. I don't know. But at the end of the chapter, Jason discovers that the two people chasing him, they were in fact the warthogs. The really creepy part of this interview was that the warthogs, they end up discovering who Jason was, and they send him a postcard once a month. There's nothing written on them, but Jason knows it's from them because they were postcards from the hotel. Jason has moved 3 times, and yet he still receives those postcards. Interview 19. We have Gemma Albers. She was a first aid station chief. There were supposed to be 7 first aid workers to be there for the employees during the storm, but 5 of them got back on the bus and left. What the hell? Gemma and Morgan were the 2 who stayed to help. There was also supposed to be medical doctors for when the first aid workers couldn't do any more to help, but they fled as well, which I feel is very unethical for doctors to run off instead of take care of people. A lot of employees had rashes because it almost never stopped raining, meaning they barely had opportunity to stay dry. The first aid workers quickly run out of antibiotics and ointment, which leads to some of the employees fighting with each other. They aren't medical professionals, so there was only so much they could do. 20 of them ended up dying because of this. Gemma and Morgan were forced to stay at the park and continue tending to everyone's wounds, but many of the tribes really wanted Morgan as their own sort of medic. One night, Morgan is kidnapped by the pirates, but the shop girls come out and attack them, preventing the kidnapping. After Brock did the whole canon bullshit, most tribes except the Freaks and the Mole Men started stealing supplies from the 2 women. There was an incident where one of them were treating a pirate, which I truly don't understand why they were helping the pirates still after almost one of them being kidnapped, but maybe it was out of fear. But that time that they were treating that pirate, a soldier came up to their medical tent and started fighting the pirate. Gemma and Morgan had a little bell that they started to ring whenever they needed help. 2 shop girls and a robot guy came out, and together they killed the pirate. The pirates threatened to shut the first aid ladies down. They continue not denying care to anyone. A couple of weeks later, Brock comes back to their tent. I forgot to mention that he came once before, saying he was going to need one of them as property to the pirates. Like, okay, don't help them. Like, fuck. But the second time that Brock comes, he demands one of them goes with them. Morgan tries giving them the everyone gets care speech, but Brock lit their medical tent on fire. Morgan tried putting the fire out, and Brock definitely wanted her. The shop girls start attacking the invading pirates. Morgan is still trying to put the fire out, and Gemma ended up taking cover. The soldiers and robots come in to help the shop girls fight the pirates. Gemma describes some of the horrible deaths that were occurring. People were on fire, arrows to the neck and the head, someone's spine stuck out of their body. Morgan gives up on putting the fire out, and the girls hear pops and witness pirates falling down, which I could guess that might be Sophie shooting them, which go Sophie, because fuck the pirates. Morgan was shot in the leg, and both ladies get out of the battle scene. This entire battle had occurred a couple of days before the National Guard arrived. Good news, Morgan ends up surviving. Yay. So this next part is a letter from the Florida National Guard, and it first mentions that 207 employees were rescued from Hurricane Sandy, and then the rest of it ends up being a Q&A between the interviewer and this person from the National Guard. Question: how was the situation at Fantastic Land presented to you? Answer: they took the rescue situation very seriously, and since the park had a lot of resources and so many others without resources needed assistance, Fantastic Land was not priority. They initially sent 35 in to rescue employees, and later another 200. Question: was the F&G told by Fantastic Land not to send rescue personnel? Answer: the higher-ups at Fantastic Land told the Florida National Guard that they felt there was no immediate danger at the park and there's enough food and water. Oh shit. Question: what was the situation when the F&G entered Fantastic Land? Answer: the sheriff's office had evidence of violence in the park, so the guards came in with body armor and assault weapons. Employees were let out in handcuffs and there was no resistance. It's revealed that a day after the F&G came into the park, one of them leaked body cam footage and were properly disciplined. Every employee in the park needed medical attention. The F&G mentions the hotel was searched the next day and they found 3 dead bodies. Question: can you tell me anything about the reactions of the survivors upon rescue? Answer: they did not encounter violence, but there was a little bit of resistance and reluctance from some to leave, which I feel like contradicts what the guard said earlier a little bit, but most of them were grateful to be rescued. Question: was there any management inside the park? Answer: no, but they were told later that Sam Garlick was supposed to be in charge. He had locked himself in a manager's station and didn't come out for the last 2 weeks. It's also revealed that Sophie from the earlier interview was charged with many of the shootings that happened at the park, but many declared she was innocent, and I'm assuming probably because she was shooting the pirates mostly. They didn't have any physical proof to tie Sophie to the shootings, and I'm also thinking this is probably why Sophie didn't want to share anything about herself and focus on Austin. Interview 20, and that is Travis Barnes. He was a former lieutenant in the Florida National Guard. Travis worked 36 hours in a row and was seeing some horrible things when rescuing everyone from Hurricane Sandy. They went through 52 towns before reaching the park, and he was the guard that posted the body cam footage. The first person they saw coming towards them was Jason from the hotel. After that interaction, Travis turned on the body camera to start recording the park. The footage shows they first discover Paul's body, and that's the kid who fell off of the roof in the beginning. He was severely decayed. The first survivor, according to the footage, comes into view, and it's Clara, leader of the shop girls. The guards told her to get down before handcuffing. The rest of the shop girls came out holding injuries, 7 dead bodies in front of their shops. The troops split up to head towards the ferry and future areas, while the others head towards the Pirate Cove and Hero Haven. Good luck to those guards. Travis, unfortunately, was part of that group to go towards the pirates and the Hero Haven. No bodies were in sight outside of the pirate section. Very weird. And Brock and the other pirates surrender willingly. Extremely weird. Travis claimed the pirates didn't seem as bad as they were made out to be. The troops then go to the heroes, And Travis ended up talking to Jill, who was in an earlier interview, who said she was ready to let go and die that day before the rescue team came. Next, they approach the circus and find 2 masks worn by the warthogs outside, which Travis mentions they believe the warthogs were butchering people in the hotel lobby. I'm definitely wondering at this point who the warthogs are and if we're ever going to discover their identities, because they almost seem like the killers who are still out there, and that is such a creepy thought. I looked up some of the reader theories later on, and most people were saying that they could have been Glenn and some girl he mentioned in his interview that I didn't end up mentioning that was very useful to him. Other people were claiming, they were saying it was Sophie and Austin, but I swear Austin was seen as dead by another interviewee. Sophie also claimed that she never knew what happened to Austin, but one beautiful thing about this story is that these are all subjective interviews and some of them could be lying. There was another theory about Jason actually killing the 3 people found in the hotel, and he was trying to convince the guards he was the victim, and I'm open to that because it's hard for me to believe someone survived that drop that Jason said he took earlier. Back to Travis's interview. The freaks and mole men were at the circus section and processed by the guards. That's the end of the body cam footage. Travis answers the question of why he uploaded the video, and he says, "I was paid." Travis also sent the video to many news outlets and received an honorable discharge. And I want to ask all of you as a listener, would you have done the same thing as Travis did with the video footage? I'm a little conflicted myself. I think, yeah, I really need the money, and in that regard, maybe I would. But then there's the whole morality behind it that kind of leaves me conflicted. Interview 21, we have Emmett R. Kelly. He was the assistant prosecutor for Florida's 15th Judicial Circuit. Emmett admits that processing the individuals involved was a nightmare due to insufficient evidence and unreliable witnesses. Sophie's trial was interesting because she was being accused of shooting others at the park. Some said it was Sophie that shot them, or they saw her do it. I'm assuming those were pirate boys most likely. But many would say it was dark and that the shooter had to have been a man. Emmett claims that Sophie is free and many from the park were found not guilty. There were 2 individuals that Emmett truly wanted to prosecute, and that was Brock Hockney and Sam Garlick. Also, probably 2 of the least liked people at the park during everything that transpired. Brock was a little tough to prosecute because there were most of the pirates that stayed loyal and defended him, while no one was defending Sam's actions. Sam's lawyer wanted to cut a deal. Apparently, and this is another part that I have a problem with. Sam set up cameras where they had that council meeting with the cannon, and no one happened to notice those cameras, and somehow those cameras continued to work throughout, and somehow Sam picked up the footage. But I swear during the National Guard part, it was mentioned that Sam was locked, like he locked himself into his office for the rest of the time after that. So I just call bullshit on any of this being realistic. But apparently the footage was able to help prosecute Brock. Emmett decides to visit Brock to see if he was misunderstood. Excuse me, sir, what? You are the prosecutor trying to put him in jail. Why would you care about seeing the potential good in him now? Well, it turns out Emmett was very disturbed by meeting Brock and realized he was a psychopath. They struck a deal with Sam if he provided them with the tapes. Also, a side note, were there not any other cameras in the park? Oh my god, all the questions I have for this book are starting to take years off of my life. I'm sorry. Sam ends up being charged for 7 misdemeanors and a huge fine, but he was able to walk free. Emmett's boss fired him, which to me is also very ridiculous because who would actually do a decent job with this type of case? The good news is that Emmett ends up being hired as a commentator and he's doing well. Now, this is one of the interviews I felt like I was waiting for the whole time, and that is interview 22 with Brock Hockney. He was a character in the Pirate Cove, leader of the pirates. And as I read that job right now, I feel goosebumps crawling up my arms because I just realized Brock might have been that pirate character all the way back in Aaron's chapter that was trying to calm Kendall down. I'm like freaking out right now. I didn't even realize, like, oh my god, my nipples are hard. You didn't need to know that. Goosebumps it's just everywhere. Brock ended up receiving life in prison. This interview is a little different because Brock has to be in control because he's a master manipulator and he has the social skills of a wet noodle at times. Brock is cold and barely answering Adam's questions. The person that's been that's the name of the person that's been interviewing everyone. And it's unfortunate because I was really looking forward to this interview because Brock is supposedly the big bad guy, but it felt like he was turning into this PSA for the young people being on their phones too much. And can we also add that everyone not having their phones after a few hours would start fighting and killing each other is very unrealistic to me. Maybe if food and water were practically gone and there was no shelter, but their situation, like, I don't buy it. But anyway, Adam asks Brock if shooting the cannon was in an act of revenge for his dying brother, and Brock is just fucking with the interviewer and threatens him a little bit. Brock does admit that Sam Garlick should be the one that's to blame for everything that transpired, since many believe he killed that girl at the beginning. He also brings up this interesting rumor of Sam Garlick having minions of his own and led one girl into being gang raped. And if this is true, it really makes you question Sam's character even more than you may have already, and if justice was truly served. Then Brock is asked about the boy that fell off of the roof. Brock said that he possibly did that. Adam also mentions Jill's interview, which not only do I find unprofessional of Adam to do, but also putting her life at risk if Brock still had connections on the outside. But Adam shares that part about Brock cutting off Tom's hands. Brock shares that he was dissatisfied with the leadership of the park and the death of his brother. Brock admits to killing the kid from the roof, but the boy was suffering and needed to be put out of his misery. Adam asks, how can someone with no violent past kill as many people as he had or were involved in? Brock says that's a good question, but he ends up kind of dancing around it. Brock does bring up what I've been thinking this whole time, and that is, if people were disturbed about what happened with the boy from the roof, why did no one try to stop me? I'm assuming from the author's point of view that maybe this is a pause for the reader to question when is it wrong and right to kill. Brock says that he never presented himself as the leader of the pirates, but many liked his ideas the most. The interview takes a little bit of a creepy turn when Brock gets really comfortable and starts asking Adam, do you know what human flesh tastes like? Which definitely adds even more darkness to the entire situation, just insinuates just how much we don't really know actually happened. Brock does mention towards the end of his interview that Adam wouldn't have lasted being trapped in that park long. He analyzes that the interviewer would have been part of the hero tribe, and he wouldn't have been able to stop the pirates. Brock hints that there's still a lot that Adam doesn't know about what actually went on in the park. And personally, that's something I find interesting about the interviews, and that we could be getting fabricated and unreliable narrators, but at the same time, I don't think I was ever really rooting for one specific character either. All right, so interview 23 is Richie Fresno, owner of Fantastic Land, and Johnny Fresno's son. Similar to Sal, this is the other interview that I just can't stand when it's listening to and just how the way they talk. Like, these two people really suck, in my opinion. I can't stand them. Richie isn't too fond of his father, but he admits to having a lot of money after everything at Fantastic Land went down. Richie could never escape the shadow and social status of his father. Which, as I was reading Richie's interview, it came off so just douchey and entitled to me. Oh my God, I couldn't stand it. Ollie, that we mentioned back towards the beginning, that was Johnny's business partner. He showed Richie the ropes on a lot of things at the park. Richie claims that if his father hadn't passed away, Fantastic Land surely would have closed. Apparently, Richie turned the business around. Richie was on board with the plan that they had for the employees during the storm, but then the power went out and no one could get in contact with the park. After 2 weeks, Richie was writing off the park and thankful for the insurance they had. Sam ended up contacting them on an emergency phone, letting them know that there were dead bodies and everything was going to shit. All they told Sam was to fix it. The next report was from Richie's IT guy saying that the exclamation point was gone, most likely from the explosion that happened earlier, and that's when Richie stepped in. He found out someone told the military that things were fine at the park, but it's never revealed who, which is such a letdown. I wanted to know who that was. Like, that's such an important character that essentially caused all of this. Richie realized that the park was going down and there was no coming back from it. Associates of his started talking about covering up the situation, but Richie knew that was too late. Richie ends up selling Fantastic Land, which who would have wanted to buy that park? But maybe this was before people truly knew what was going on there yet. Maybe. His life is good overall, but the park ended up being demolished, and what they're building there is so messed up, in my opinion. So instead of Fantasticland, they have built a place where you get to pick a tribe and fake fight with other visitors. At least Richie admits that's fucked up. Now we have the ending of the book, which is Adam, who is the interviewer this whole time, talking about his findings and why he believes that things happened the way that they did. He claims that there was plenty of food and water for everyone and that the violence was unnecessary. He sensed a lot of sadness throughout the interviews, like, no shit, Sherlock. They went through something very traumatic. The one question Adam was asked the most was, why did the employees start killing each other so quickly? He believes that it was the disassociation with reality, and this ties back into the cell phone PSA thing again. I literally screamed and I begged with God, please don't let me suffer much longer with this story. Adam shares what some of the interviewees are up to now. Jill works for a security company. Sophie has a podcast. I'm glad to see we're both starving artists. And Glenn ended up on a monster makeup competition show. Adam ends everything with the question, what did we really learn from all this? Which makes me personally ask the question, why did I read this? Maybe, just maybe, it was to save a soul or two from reading it themselves. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts by commenting on the Spotify episode and or reviewing the podcast wherever you listen. If you want to stay up to date on the podcast and other book content, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Franks_fiction. Also, send me some mystery and thriller book recommendations that maybe I can cover on the podcast and have everyone vote for in the book club. And you could do that through social media or emailing me at franksfiction@yahoo.com. I hope you have a thrilling day. Bye.